Oh.
Dan felt his anger boiling inside him, feeling humiliated. He forced himself to swallow his pride. When he got home, he stood under the cold shower, hoping it would wash away the shame. But later, lying in bed, he couldn't stop replaying the moment in his mind. He had been a deadly assassin for 18 years, and he tried to stay patient because he wanted to be a good father and husband. I really admire that about him. It's incredible. The movie begins in Buffalo, where Dan works as a top car salesman. He wins Salesman of the Month all the time because he understands his customers so well. His life is simple, and he's excited to celebrate his wedding anniversary with his wife, Jessica. They have 3 children, Kyle, Max, and Na. Kyle and Max often argue, which creates tension at home, and Dan feels disconnected from Kyle, who spends most of his time playing video games. At the same time, Na, their oldest, is thinking about changing her college major because of her boyfriend, and that worries Dan. Dan tries to guide his kids, but they hardly ever listen. Kyle keeps sneaking away to play video games, and Na insists she's old enough to make her own decisions. Dan and Jessica still enjoy their yearly trips to the festival. After an exciting roller coaster ride, Dan promised to make the rest of their day even better. But their fun was suddenly interrupted when a stranger took a photo of them kissing and posted it online without permission. Things got worse when that same person spilled a drink on Dan and insulted Jessica. Even though Dan was furious, he chose to walk away and not get violent. Jessica felt both relieved and a little disappointed by his decision. Back at home, Dan had a hard time dealing with his frustration, while Jessica tried to release her stress through boxing only to accidentally hit her sparring partner. This accident led to an unexpected friendship with Gwen, a travel agent Jessica soon started talking to and confiding in during their smoothie breaks. Jessica tells Dan she feels trapped. She loves him as a husband and father, but she's frustrated that he's become too comfortable with their routine. Later, while shopping with Max, Dan notices a suspicious man following them. Realizing something is wrong, he stays alert. When the man suddenly attacks, Dan quickly defeats him, shocking everyone who sees it. Back at home, Dan opens a hidden compartment that holds a gun, an old passport, and cash. Shaken by what happened, he contacts Augie, an old associate, to help him get new identities for his family. Augie warned Dan that his family was in serious danger, most likely because of his former boss, McCaffrey, and told him they needed to leave right away. Dan, who used to be an assassin, finally admitted that he had kept his past a secret from his family. He believed McCaffrey had found him because of the photo taken at the festival. While searching for Na, Dan discovered she had quit her job months earlier after being betrayed, and he found her hiding under the bleachers, feeling hopeless about abandoning her dreams. But there was no time to talk it through. They still needed to find her brother. But instead of being at chess club, he was actually at a neighbor's house playing video games. Dan told the kids they were going to Vegas and persuaded Jessica, who was still at work, to join them on the spontaneous trip she'd always dreamed about. She was unsure at first, but eventually agreed. However, when they arrived, McCaffrey's men were already waiting for them in the parking lot. As a bus passed by, Dan used the moment to slip away from the men chasing him, making sure his family didn't notice anything. But escaping became harder because the enemies were using satellite tracking. Dan drove to his workplace, closed the gate, and removed a tracking device he had hidden on his car. Luckily, the pursuers didn't catch him. To confuse them, he placed the tracker on a coworker's car and sent him onto the highway. This gave Dan less than 33 hours before they would find him again. Meanwhile, his family kept posting about their trip online without realizing the danger. Dan quickly took their phones to stop any more information from leaking. To the family, the trip felt pointless, but the bigger issue was that they had no idea where they were actually going. At the travel agency, Dan managed a clever trade that got his family a map for their trip, and for the first time, they all felt closer. Meanwhile, McCaffrey went to Dan's house and realized the family still didn't know they were in danger. He was sure that sooner or later, someone in the family would make a mistake. Later on, while Kyle was talking with his sister, a stranger recognized him from his live streams and asked for a selfie. Dan noticed this and knew it would alert McCaffrey to their location. He kept driving to stay ahead. With new trackers placed on them, Dan found 3 of them. While his family slept, he played music through their headphones to cover any noise. When a gunshot shattered his side mirror, Dan dodged the ambush and crashed into only one pursuer before managing to escape. Dan's family stayed fast asleep. They were the deepest sleepers he had ever known. After driving all night and finally losing the last pursuer, Dan took a short rest while his family still didn't wake up. When they reached the college, Na argued that she didn't want to visit the campus, while Jessica excitedly talked about how she used to party there. Then admitted she only wanted to come because her boyfriend, Trevor, studied at the school. During the tour, Dan noticed a German man talking on the phone and feared he was working for McCaffrey. Before Dan could do anything, another man attacked him. A fast fight broke out in a chemistry lab, and Dan defeated the attacker before quietly returning to his family. As the family was getting ready to leave, Na went back to see Trevor only to discover he had been cheating on her. Heartbroken, she returned to the group in tears. Dan comforted her and taught her a martial arts move, which helped her feel stronger and closer to her family. While they continued their trip, their bond grew. During the drive, Na thanked Dan for always supporting her and started thinking about returning to her editorial job. At a small motel, Dan and Jessica shared a tender moment, and Jessica felt her love for him return, sensing something had changed in him. Meanwhile, Dan contacted Augie, who was on his way with new identities, though Dan still hadn't told his family about it. Dan quietly returned the phone he had taken and prepared himself to finally talk with Kyle. When they sat down, Kyle opened up about his professional streaming career and challenged Dan to a laser tag match to show what he could do. They made a bet. Whoever tagged 3 opponents first would win. Using his old skills, Dan quickly tagged 2 players, but Kyle caught up with 2 accurate shots of his own. In the end, Dan won the match, but the friendly game helped them grow closer. When the family reached Las Vegas, they checked into a luxury suite. Before they could settle in, Dan slipped away to meet Augie, who handed him new identities, one-way tickets to Vancouver, and a large amount of cash. Dan planned to tell Jessica the truth during a romantic dinner while Na stayed in the suite to watch Max. He told the kids not to leave the room, but Kyle, excited about his growing gaming fame, snuck out to the HyperX arena. There, people recognized him, and Valky even invited him to join her team for the Valorant finals. Kyle had no idea that McCaffrey's men were also watching him. While Na talked with a gamer who gave up his spot for Kyle, Kyle went on to dominate the match. Meanwhile, Dan tried several times to confess everything to Jessica at dinner, but he kept getting interrupted. In the end, he decided to delay the truth and took her gambling instead, hoping to buy more time. Later, Dan tried to check on the kids but got no reply, so he and Jessica rushed back to the suite. Jessica was fooled by dolls arranged to look like the kids sleeping and felt relieved. While she was getting ready to romantic music, McCaffrey's men suddenly burst into the room. Dan reacted fast. He fought them off, even using vodka to start a fire and take down several attackers. But Jessica was captured. Dan quietly grabbed a knife, and when one of the men called him Sean, Jessica realized he had been hiding a secret life. Dan used the moment of confusion to defeat the attacker. Jessica then searched for the kids, found only the dolls, and immediately understood the truth: they had to go to HyperX, the place Kyle had mentioned earlier. Kyle's team lost the match even though he scored 30 kills. After it ended, Dan and Jessica picked up the kids. Dan finally told them the truth, that he used to be a secret assassin and was now being hunted by his former co-workers. The kids didn't believe him at first, but an attack proved he was telling the truth and forced them to hide behind a car. Dan fought the attacker, but her armor made it difficult. He admitted he had worked as a mercenary for McCaffrey and had killed 42 people. Kyle called him a hypocrite, but he also began to understand why Dan never wanted to leave the city or be on social media. Dan gave his family new identities. Jessica became Molly, and Kyle became Van after hiding the truth for 18 years. But the family rejected him. Jessica chose to leave, promising to take care of the kids, and called Gwen for help. Dan stayed outside and kept watch until morning. Even when he warned her about McCaffrey, Jessica told him to stay away. When Jessica met Gwen, she realized Gwen was sharp and dangerous. Gwen talked about a former lover who built a new life with a woman she didn't like. Instead of being jealous, Gwen befriended the woman and patiently waited for the right moment to trap her. Jessica managed to outsmart McCaffrey, but the danger wasn't over. McCaffrey called Dan and revealed that he had captured Dan's family. He ordered Dan to meet him at an abandoned hotel. In the penthouse, McCaffrey, who was actually Dan's biological father, mocked him and demanded he return to work for him. He promised to free the family if Dan agreed and threatened to kill them if he refused. Even though Dan had already defeated many of McCaffrey's men, he felt he had no choice but to obey. Meanwhile, Jessica and the kids made a promise. They would protect Dan from this cruel fate. Just moments earlier, the kids wanted to cut ties with Dan, but as Kyle pressed the elevator button, they changed their minds. While they tried to convince Jessica not to leave Dan, Jessica suddenly protected the family by taking down a henchman during Max's diaper change. They all decided to stand with Dan. Meanwhile, Gwen tried to lure Dan back and ignored the technician, but Dan's family arrived in time to save him. Dan knocked Gwen out and captured the technician. He apologized to Jessica for hiding the truth and promised to be honest and fully committed from now on. At the same time, McCaffrey grew suspicious of the technician, and Kyle's drone skills revealed Dan's own forgotten tech abilities. As the henchman moved in, Dan told his family to run to the rooftop while he stayed behind to fight. Kyle used his drone to track the attackers. Even though Dan was outnumbered, he defeated each henchman with precision. McCaffrey, alerted by the drone, woke Gwen and sent her after Dan's family. Dan begged his father to stop, but McCaffrey refused. Under heavy gunfire, Dan avoided every shot. Meanwhile, Jessica hid the kids and prepared her weapon. When the elevator opened, Gwen stepped out, confident and mocking her. Jessica held her ground as Kyle warned Dan that 9 more henchmen were on the way. Dan defeated each henchman, making it surprising that McCaffrey hired such bad shooters. McCaffrey was satisfied only when he finally managed to shoot down Kyle's drone. Meanwhile, Gwen overpowered Jessica and buried her under debris. McCaffrey knocked Dan to the ground and nearly shot him, but got distracted while bragging about Dan's supposed weakness. Gwen cornered the kids, which gave Jessica a chance to break free, but Gwen still beat her badly. Dan fought McCaffrey hand-to-hand, while Jessica, using the last of her strength, tried to strike Gwen with a bamboo stick, but she failed. Gwen mocked Jessica's efforts, and Jessica eventually collapsed. As McCaffrey prepared to kill Dan, the family showed up to support him, giving Dan the chance he needed to stop his father. They all reunited just as the police arrived. 6 months later, Na was working as a successful journalist. Dan ran a self-defense business with Augie. Jessica became a trainer, and Kyle continued making videos. The family packed up their RV for a big road trip to take Na to Stanford. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.